Pastor Mark and Pastor Jam.
Great to be here. My name is, please sit down, guys, sit down. My name is Mark, I'm part of the team. This is Jemima, she's part of my team.
What a privilege to have both of you in the room to share with us wisdom from the Word of God on how do you do relationships God's way. Okay, the first question I will be asking you has to do with marriage. Okay, you guys have been married for 12 years now, and why don't you share with us, right? What do you think the other one does which makes your marriage work? Is it going to be ladies first?
Ladies first.
Well, I think
Take your
that
time with this answer as well.
I think that my husband communicates really well. He is a great communicator. He is not the typical man that doesn't share his feelings. He shares his feelings, he talks, and he makes sure that we're always talking, that we're always communicating. Where are you at with this, babe? Where are you thinking? Come on. Like he's forcing me to talk. And so communication, I think, is one of the greatest assets that you would bring, I think, because I would just rather put it under the carpet and go, shake it off and move on. But let's deal with this, and you got to deal. And he'll keep dealing with it until we're resolved.
Yeah, I do that.
Okay.
That's true. Guilty as charged. I think one of the things, because of the pace of our life and what's going on in terms of travel in and out, it's just nonstop in some ways. One of the things that I think Jemima carries, I think everyone needs in marriage, which she does. So she carries a resilience. You can't be married a long time and be so fragile, fickle, or broken. I mean, she's still feminine. She's still, a lady in every sense of the word. But maybe it was the missional upbringing. Maybe it was just the travel, or maybe it was the journey of. But I think sometimes resilience isn't a personality trait. It's something that you develop. Iron sharpening iron. So good. And well, let's put it another way. I don't know many who could have survived being married to me for 12 years. Apart from Jemima.
It's been a joy.
Can you say that again with a bit more sincerity, please?
It's been a joy.
So, but I think resilience is a huge virtue. I mean, especially in this era where everybody's so sensitive, the way you get something is to be offended these days. Yeah. I'm so offended. Yeah. And yet there's a resilience that you need if you're going to have longevity in anything, never mind marriage. And that's an unusual, but I mean, obviously, there's so many qualities that she does have that makes it work. I often say this when I preach, I give her 99% of the credit for our marriage because I think she's made the most insane adaptation. From the day we got married, the day after, she changed her country, her surname, her covering, her job, everything, really, in one day. And I hats off because she got swept up into my world. I didn't get swept up into her world. It became our world. But she's not only adaptable, but incredibly resilient. And I think that's been the key for 12 years.
Wow, I can echo exactly what Pastor Mark shares because Pastor Jam always, when she has the women's session with us, she always says, women, trust God to trust your spouse. We cannot change our spouse, but God can. Elaine! I have to apply that in my own marriage as well. No, okay.
There's nothing to change in you, babe.
No, that is actually a good point, though. We do. Sometimes in our worst fights, she'll be like, one day you're going to stand before God. And I'm like, till that day, stand before me. See, it's getting heated already. No, but I think because, on the personality scale, don't know what personality tests there are, but we rank as the
same.
Full-on, passionate,
number 8.
intense.
Yes.
Number 8 on Enneagram, choleric on
Both
the
of
other
us.
one. Whatever it is, it's the crazy one. I'm probably more scary. You're probably more intense.
Yes.
Sometimes you're more scary and I'm more intense, but either way, Like, so it needs great communication, with, especially with the travel, and it needs constant communication, and as well as great resilience. And I think Jemima does that amazingly well.
Okay. Thank you so much, for the insight. But we would love probably to hear what are some areas in your marriage that, like what are you working on to add value into your marriage? Maybe something that, God can use me to love my spouse while He's changing me. So, in what area do you think that you guys, being very intentional to work on? It could be this season. It could be something that
I think we work on our love languages together because we both receive love differently. And what can happen in a marriage is you can get unhappy because you don't feel loved, and you're giving your spouse the love of the way you receive it. And then you get angry with them because you're like, what is your problem? I'm doing all this stuff for you. Why don't you feel love? And they're like, that's not how I feel love. And so we really talked through a lot of our love language. And so mine is gifts. And so Mark whenever he's at the airport, he'll always go to my favorite store and get me a gift. Everything I wear is from him.
I'm broke.
My watch.
But happy. Happily broke.
So he knows that that's my love language, and his is words of affirmation, and that doesn't come natural to me. So always making sure I let him know I love him and that he's the best preacher in the world, that he did really well, and also acts of service as well, I would say, is yours.
And I mean, it takes time to get to know each other. I remember, it was at our second year anniversary. She bought me a James Brown DVD.
First Christmas. Yeah.
I'm like, James Brown. She goes, I thought you'd like James Brown. I'm like, why? Because I'm brown? And I don't know if we had a fight, but
Yeah.
I gave it away pretty much the next day. But it's a journey. It's a journey of getting to know how you like, what you love about each other. And anyway.
So good, so good. Thank you. Now let's talk about fights. Fights are part and parcel of every marriage. And as one of the pastors here in Kingdomcity, we constantly help mediate couples who just really find it a struggle to resolve conflicts healthily, or to keep communications at a healthy level. Now, what are some godly principles you can share with us on how to resolve conflicts healthily?
Well, I think in our first year of marriage, Mark developed, he said to me when we were fighting that when we resolve it, we need to make sure that we take all the seeds out of our hearts, of all the things that we say. So because both of us can use words quite strongly and sharply.
It's a gift.
And there are some words he says, I don't even understand what they are, but he makes sure that after he says, I cancel and I take that seed out of your heart. And what happens is whatever was said in the fight, it never comes back to plague me later on when if the enemy would try and remind me, it just falls, it doesn't have no hold on me because anything he said in the fight, or anything I said in the fight, we cancel it off each other. So when we come to fight, we always start at ground zero because we don't have a buildup of unresolved fights that we're building up. We're always going back to the beginning because it's like a clean slate because we make sure that we cancel that.
I think it's important you deal with residue, and it's important that you end every fight closer than before the fight. And if you're married, that's just a good principle. Like, in other words, we had a tough day, a tough night, a tough week, tough whatever. Okay, it doesn't matter how long it takes, but make sure that at the end of the whole chapter, you're closer than you were before the fight. In other words, you take what the enemy meant for evil and turn it for good. And I think that applies in everything in discipleship, including marriage. And if you can do that, you can turn any fight into a new, landmark or milestone for your marriage. And it doesn't have to be the major ones, but even the minor ones. And I think sometimes it just gets tiring. People I'd rather not talk about it. And I know different personality types are wired that way. But I think that's what the enemy does. Sometimes, like a boxer, he won't try and take you with a knockout punch. He'll just wear you down bit by bit, bit by bit, bit by bit. And at the end of each round, you see the boxers go back to the corner and the trainer. I think a huge part of resolution of conflict and fight is to make sure you start the next round better than you finished the last round. It's not just accumulating scars and sores over the journey of time. You want to feel closer and better. And I think that it's not easy. It takes humility, it takes vulnerability, it takes a bunch of stuff. But it's worth doing because this thing has to last through every sort of conflict possible.
So good. What advice would you give couples that just cannot even get to the stage of communicating? One is so victim. Every word that is spoken, they just like, wow, man, you are blaming me, everything. And then the other one is so indifferent. And it's like, what is wrong with you? You are so sensitive, right? And they can't even talk even one sentence without fighting. So what advice would you give?
Well, what I'd say to Andy is, no, I'm just joking. Just joking. No. It's not Pastor Andy and Pastor Elaine are amazing. It's not. No, that's a great question. That's a great question. I would send them both to This Is Freedom. Seriously. Because, all of us have wholeness issues. Then I'd tell them to do Greenhouse. And listen to Pastor David's wholeness seminar the whole year and make sure you get healing. No, but it is a good question because sometimes, victim and oppression can just literally be this horrible cycle that spirals downwards. And look, we haven't had the perfect marriage and we've not done everything right. It's a fallacy to think that's what's happened. But I do think that that's where iron sharpening iron means you don't allow. The one thing we agree on is there's no divorce. There's no, we're not quitting. Like sometimes, she's really tired, 2 a.m., and I'm like, I will not let her sleep, and vice versa. Like I'll just, and she'll literally, and I think that's the point. There's no formula to fix these problems, but I think when everybody is working on themselves, and that's why we advise couples who are not yet married, get yourself whole, because whatever fragility you have will be exposed and magnified in marriage.
I think, too, when you approach your spouse with the view that it's your job to love him more than yourself. So if I'm coming, it's my job that is my role, is to love him, and his needs are more important than my needs, which is we're so used to our needs being met. But when you have that mindset, no, his needs are more important than mine, his needs are my priority, and he comes with that angle as well, then the victim and will bypass those things because we really want to, no, what he's saying is important, and asking the Holy Spirit. Sometimes when we're fighting, I am praying in my head, Holy Spirit, please come into the room. I know we don't deserve this right now, but presence of God, please come in right now. We need you right now. I'm praying that in my mind as we're having, and sometimes we do feel the presence of God just come in, or, we feel, or something just switches, or sometimes I just say something funny and then we just laugh, or you say something funny and the whole thing is broken because, it's just we're inviting the Lord into our fight, which is,
So good. Yeah. Do you guys surround yourself with mentors, people that you can bounce off stuff? Sometimes, who know both of you, and sometimes when you cannot see a perspective, just having a third party just coming in and say, hey, this is one area. I mean, would that be a great advice?
I think that's really important. Even for us, like there are people that I can go to. I mean, I can't remember. We haven't sat down with another couple. We did in the early years a bit, and we sat down with other couples. The only thing you have to make sure is that you're, and if you're one of the couples giving advice, you have to make sure you don't say things like, if I was you, because you're not them. And so everyone has a unique journey and a unique battle. But if the day you lose accountability and you lose the desire to stay connected and be vulnerable, sometimes I'll talk to someone like Pastor David and I'll just say, listen, and this is where I'm at, this is what I'm going through. Jemima will talk to people as well. And I think there's, in our world anyway, certainly in our context, it's a fishbowl. Like you can't hide too much. If we can't have a bad week, there's too many meetings. And even if she's mad at me and I'm mad at her, I can't stay mad because I got to preach on the weekend. So I have to start to forgive, and by Thursday I need to soften. By Friday I need to come together. By Saturday I need to be holy, and Sunday I can preach.
You have preached.
She can afford to just be in a bad.
You have preached angry at me.
At a wedding
and you
once.
preached at me. It was at me, and someone was sitting next to me and said, "Hey,
I think that was the Holy Spirit speaking to you.
yeah." I was,
But
preaching
but
at you?
I do think that our life is such that we have to resolve. That's why one of the things is that there's nothing we have to go there.
When we see a good marriage, when we have couples come who like guest speakers and stuff, and they have a good marriage, we always ask them, "What's the secret of a good marriage?" And or what advice can you give us?
Yeah,
And they
that's
always.
true.
So even Pastor Paul Marie Young were around. We were having dinner. We said, "What's the secret?" So when we see a marriage or Pastor Martin Rod Steele, we asked them and we said, "You guys are obviously in love. Can you tell us what are?" So we do when we see a marriage that we like, we always ask, "What's the secret? Can you give us advice on things like that?" We also went to a psychologist a couple of years ago. We both filled out a survey. The psychologist analyzed us and
5 years ago.
5 years ago, and explained to us the way we're wired, the way we think, and the way. And it was really good because there was brokenness in me that had to be. I had to go to God on, and it was different when a third person was sitting there telling me the things he'd been telling me for years, and then I was like, "Oh wow." I really do need to go work on these issues, and I went on a journey of things that I hope I've improved on.
Oh, you're amazing, babe. I give you 99.5% of it.
But
Wow, so guys, the take home from this conversation is become a carrier of the house. You know why?
Wow,
Because
yes.
because that way you have a little gap in order to deal with issues, right? Because before you come and you tell someone they need to love or they need to forgive, we need to do it. Wow,
Good.
that's great.
Wow,
Let's
that's good of
move on.
That's amazing.
Let's move on now to talk about families. And family would actually cover kids as well as our extended family, in-laws, parents. Having children definitely changes the dynamics of any marriage. Now that you've got 2 kids, and it's not just the 2 of you, what advice would you give families with children on how to create balance in their family? Maybe one of you could share with us, like, how do you create balance between spending time with each other and with the boys? And also the other one could share with us, how do you create a balance between disciplining your boys and loving them, like through their tantrums or rebellious stage? Yeah.
Firstly, I want to say there's probably so many better people to listen to on this topic. We are parents, we're growing, we're making our mistakes, we're learning. Our kids are 10 and 7. There are people who've got kids who are teenagers or even adults, and they're probably far better well springs of advice in terms of just having that experience. But I would say that in our journey so far, we have just tried to include the kids in this season at least. And, they do live a pretty full-on life between countries and all of that. But we've tried to include them because the more we have in common going in the same direction, the better it is. Like if I'm doing this, Jemima's doing this, Zeke's doing that, Caleb's doing that, it's going to be so hard to have central points but if all of us are going the same direction, even if there's issues, conflict, problems, mood swings, whatever, you've got a better chance because we're at least heading in the same direction as a family. We got different personalities. Zeke and Caleb are different personalities. Jemima and I are different personalities. And yet, at the same time, we're all heading in the same direction. And I think that's important. And now, if your kids are young enough and you've got the luxury, you can shape that. If your kids are older, obviously it's a different dynamic and you've got to let things be what they are. But I think for us, we've tried to make sure we've included all 4 of us, where possible anyway, in light of what we're doing on the same journey. And it's minimized tension. It still is tension. There's still conflict. But at least if we're heading in the same direction, we're swinging from the same pole at least, we're more likely to hit it.
I think Mark is a brilliant father. He really shows the father's heart to the boys, and even when he disciplines them, I sit back and he can be so strong but love them at the same time, and it's quite amazing to watch because you can see that they're getting convicted and they're getting told strongly, but then there's a love in his eyes, and Caleb pulls these puppy eyes, and Mark will stop and hug him and then go back to telling him it's so funny. But they really do have...
In fact, you will look, Caleb will be standing there, and he'll start doing the face, and Jemima will be behind him going, don't. I'm like, yeah, but it's true.
It is.
And Caleb, just the thought of it, he will lean and go, Dad, can I have a hug first? I don't ever remember going in for a hug with
Yeah.
my dad when I was about to get. So it tells me that in the middle of all of that, some things work that they know deep down. This man is angry at me, but I know he loves me. I know he does. And admittedly, he's trying to sort of maybe lessen the punishment. But I think our boys, we've had.
And you are very present. Mark is a very present dad. So even though he travels a lot, you can be around your kids a lot, but you may not be engaged with your kids. But he is very engaged with them. So he'll come home from a trip and he'll immediately go out and play basketball with them or play Xbox with. He's very engaged. So his presence brings an engagement, and so their identity is from him. Their love and their security is from him. They're very secure. Every time we have guests come over, they always say, your children are very secure. And I would credit that to Mark because he is, even though he's a busy dad, and he always takes their phone calls, always messages them back, and they know that they are the most important.
And I would say, and again, and I'd say what Jemima has done amazingly well with the boys is, and I mean, you know, no weapon formed against you, and like she'll teach them to preach and pray in tongues, and she literally is a spiritual weapon. And so therefore the boys are so centered on that. And I think any relationship that you're going to have revival in requires you to have God as the center, God as the absolute middle of everything you do. You know, because we can have debate as to this principle or that principle. There's books about how to raise your kids this way or that way. There's how to do it this way, and they're all good. The problem is not trying to settle on a method or a formula, but make sure God is the center. And one thing Jemima does, and it's constant, like whether praying in the morning, praying at night, including God every step of the way. So the boys, even from a young age, have a very much awareness. Look, mom and dad can't fix all your problems, but you need to have a walk with God that can actually talk to God about it, you know, bless each other. Even when they fight, we make them pray. I mean, they're pastors' kids, so they're going to do these kind of things, you know. So anyway, look, we are still a major work in progress. I mean, we probably violate every parenting principle that's possible, but somehow by God's grace, they're still saved. Well, Zeke's saved. We don't know about Caleb. Actually, Caleb leaned over to me today and said, he saw your testimony at the water baptism. He goes, Dad, I want to be water baptized. I'm 7. I should be water baptized by now. So I was like, okay, maybe he's going to get saved soon, yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love how you not only just discipline your kid, but you actually explain to them the why. You know, that we love you, but we don't love your behavior. But that's so good. Now, what would you say to someone that doesn't believe in disciplining their kids? You know,
Good luck. I mean, if you don't believe in disciplining your kids, meaning...
Like they will grow out of it. They will learn, you know, like they just believe to just pray for
Yeah,
them.
look,
But
I mean, I don't want to speak into the specifics of how you discipline. Discipline doesn't always have to be like physical in that sense. But if you don't believe in disciplining your kids, you don't love your kids. Because
so good.
God says it's only a father who loves his son who disciplines him. And God talks about his discipline for us and absolutely anchors that in his love for us. It's not because I'm mad at you that I discipline you. It's because I love you. I don't want the rest of the world to pay because I allowed you to grow up into some absolute spoiled brat who thinks this is acceptable behavior. And so I don't know. I think you got to look at you got to look ahead and say if you don't like disciplining them, ask them why. Because there's probably something linked to maybe their upbringing, their childhood. You know, maybe you got over disciplined as a child. So you don't want to even say anything because you think your personality was suppressed. I'm not suppressing my child's personality by disciplining them. And I think, like the pendulum, if it swings from one to the end, you have a different era on the other side of the spectrum. So discipline is biblical.
And I think it's so important that first off, you got to look at your child's personality. They are different. They respond different. So it's not one thing works for all. And the other thing is we always need to link our children back to God. And I always make sure that the boys resolve whatever happened with God. And I send them to their room and I say, you speak to the Holy Spirit and you hear what he says. And they'll always come out and they'll say, Mom, I'm really sorry. You know, the Holy Spirit told me this, or, you know, he told me that I am loved. And like they get that from God. And that's way more powerful than me yelling at them and telling them off. Good. But also another thing is that we should apologize as parents when we do the wrong thing. So sometimes I do lose my temper And I'm yelling, and I always make sure when I'm in anger and I've done something in anger, I always go, I'm so sorry, son. I should not have lost my anger in you. Will you please forgive me? And they go, that's okay, Mama. I love you. And they hug me. So they know that I'm also human and I make mistakes, but I make sure that I ask their forgiveness.
Very good.
So good. Are you guys blessed so far? Incredible nuggets of gold. Okay, my mom sometimes joke with me, right? She says it's easier to get a hold of the Prime Minister of Malaysia than me. Now, I can't imagine how you guys, with your limited time and your travels, how do you manage quality time with your extended family? Maybe share with us, how do you navigate through the expectation and demands that they sometimes place on you guys?
Live in a different country. No, jokes. Okay, that's bad. I can't believe I said that. No, I think when you get married, you have to understand that you are creating a family. Now, I think especially in Asian culture where we are very communal, and I think there's a wisdom and a grace and such a benefit to being connected. I still love my mom and dad. I get along well with Jemima's mom and dad. We are blessed. We have good parents. They're still together. They all four love God. And it's just, we're unusually blessed. We understand not everyone's extended family is the same. But I would say that we've had to prioritize, and I would say this, you've got to distinguish between loving them, which you must do unconditionally, and allowing everyone to influence you. I've met 40-year-old married people who are still under the thumb of their parents. And the spouses can't agree because there's, often I've seen, you would have seen this a lot, the difference between obeying your parents and honoring your parents. And it says, children, obey your parents in the Lord. While you're a child, you have to obey your parents. It's not an option, right? But then it says, honor your father and mother. When I'm 60 and my dad is 90, I'm still honoring him even though I might be a granddad. Because it says, honor your father and mother. As long as they're alive, honor your father and mother. But to honor my father when I'm 60 and he's 90 does not mean I need to obey him when I'm 60 and he's 90. Because you think about it, just logically, the day we got married, if her parents say go this way, my parents say go this way, one of us being disobedient. But I'm not supposed to, at that point, be obeying my parents, but I am supposed to be honoring them. And I think if you're a parent, and we have to watch this, that we don't manipulate our kids by saying, you must honor me. What we really mean is do exactly what I say, obey me. Now, that's correct if you're a child. You got no choice when you're a child. But there comes a transition point. When they're young, they need my permission. As they get older, they need my parameters. And when they are adults, they need my perspective. And I think as an adult, if I'm still giving them permission on everything, I've actually created a dysfunction. I want our children to be raised in a way where they're old enough to make decisions. And of course, as a friend, as a father, I'll always be there for them. And I think I'm saying all of that to say you've got to find the context in which your extended family fit. Love them, celebrate them, go. But we've had to also make some decisions. And we got great extended family. We don't not get along with any of them. But I think we've had to sacrifice. We've had to explain. Not everyone will understand. But I've also got to realize, Jesus, I don't think was being cheeky or disloyal when he was teaching in the synagogue and someone said, hey, there's your mom and your brothers. And he goes, who's my mother and my brother? He who does the will of my Father in heaven. He's my mother and brother. Like, he wasn't saying, I don't regard my extended family. He was just saying, I love my family, but where I'm going, I'm one day going to stand before God, and this is what I need to do. The larger the extended family gets, the harder it is to please everyone. You are going to be a clown juggling plates, trying to please everyone. You'll lose your peace, and before you know it, you blink, you'll be 55, and you wonder why you got nowhere in life. Because you've been so busy trying to please everybody. And so I hope I have the grace as I grow to allow my boys to become whatever God's called them to be, and continue those adjustments. I hope I always honor my parents, and I always honor my extended family, and where we can, we genuinely try to help. But honestly, it is going to be a tension, and you have to prioritize. Always love them, but be careful who influences you. Because not everyone in your extended family is going to love what you're doing, support what you're doing, or agree with what you're doing. That doesn't mean you don't love them. You got to love them, but you just got to make sure you protect the influence of your heart. Allow the people who are heading in your direction to speak into that, not just everybody else. Because if I started taking Jemima and the boys on the same journey because my parents wanted me to go that way, I'm yanking her into my dysfunction because I haven't grown up to be a man to go, okay, but this is what God's asked me to do. And so, well, what are we going to do? So that's a big touchy thing for an Asian family context. So I don't want to create a problem, but I just do think there's a wise way to navigate that. And if you don't, that's often what, I mean, don't you see a lot of pastoral issues about that? So if you have any questions, please email Pastor Elaine. Sorry, honey, I took a long time. Do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I picked up something incredible from the recent session we had with Pastor Paul about how sometimes handling our extended family would mean postponing celebrations, right? I mean, we don't have to, they insist they want to celebrate a Christmas or a particular occasion, but we could actually tell them, hey, we can celebrate on a different day, a different week, but it's still celebrating. But that's so incredible.
Yeah, and we do that. We are blessed to have extended family that come to church. So if we do have time, then we'll have lunch with them after church, or you often, if you're staying, you'll go to your parents' house in between services. So we make opportunities, we take the opportunity when we have it to be able to see them.
Yeah, and we genuinely love and honor them all. So this is not an excuse to not do that. It's just you have to learn clarity or you'll end up being pulled from pillar to post in the name of honor. And next thing you know, you're disoriented and you're not sure how to handle that.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
a lot there.
So good. Now we are going to come to the topic of singleness. Both of you got married in your 30s, and we would love to hear how you navigated through your singlehood. Maybe tell us something each on what you did well and what you did not do so well through those seasons.
What I didn't do well, probably, for a season was I compared. I wasted too much time comparing myself to people that were married. It's not fair. How come they're getting married and not me? And I wish I was married and, and I wasted headspace, energy, feelings, all on comparison. And it just doesn't go anywhere. And the reality is that you're complete when you're single, and you're complete when you're married. There's no incomplete season and complete season. There's also, you're not left on the shelf. It's not like God went, oops, I forgot. No, he had a plan and a purpose for me. I had to be ready for what God had for me. I wasn't ready, and if I had met Mark any earlier, it would have been a disaster, I think. So I had to become the woman of God, or the woman that needed to be the best wife for Mark. And so I think that you got to trust God's timing. So I think I wasted time. The thing I did good was that I never fed. I tried not to feed my singleness urges. I didn't watch those movies. I didn't listen to those love songs. I just cut it out, and these days there's social media. There wasn't social media so much back then. But anything that you find yourself being affected and you feel lonely, cut it out. It's not worth it. It's not worth losing your peace or your hope about. And I read books on being single. I read books on amazing people that did incredible things that were single. I inspired myself to do that, and I poured all my energy into the house of God in my later years of singleness. I was like, I had the time, I had the energy, and so when I wasn't where I was at the house of God serving him and doing that. And I felt the Lord say that to me, that until your husband and children come along, this house is your husband and children. What effort you put into that, I want you to put into this house. And so I did that with all my heart.
Brilliant. I mean, probably pretty similar. My mistake was periods of my singlehood wasting it in mourning / self-pity, victim. I talked about how Jemima is resilient. Part of that has made me more resilient, but I had a sensitivity, and like I said, I was groomsman 9 times, right? Best man 9 times. Like the first time it was an honor. By the 4th time it started to get expensive. And by the 8th time, I didn't want to be there, right? But I think I spent time mourning
You had
over
2 siblings get married before
my
you.
younger siblings
Your
got
2
married.
younger siblings.
The people I mentored, they started getting married. They all started having kids. And and so really, it's only when I came to Malaysia, I realized people are single in their 30s, and that's normal. In Australia, in Australia, and you're like, you were 22 and not married. They're like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, oh my gosh, I did not fit. So I think from that perspective, similar. I wasted chunks of time, not mourning, but feeling sorry for myself. When, are you kidding me? God actually, I remember, I think I've shared the story somewhere, but I remember I was once sitting in my brother's house. He's married, and I'm thinking, oh, woe is me. Nobody loves me, da da da. And I felt the Lord say to me, it was a quick moment, and I was feeling just a little, I wasn't depressed, but I was certainly down. And I said, son, of all the people I chose to keep for myself a little longer, I chose you. And I went from feeling left out to feeling specially chosen in 1 second. In 1 second. Like, it wasn't like he made me feel better about being single. I went from feeling depressed, like as if I was missing out, to, oh my gosh, all those poor people that had to get married, and God chose me, yes. Like, it was a God moment for me. I'm not creating some doctrine out of that. And if you get married young, good luck. But I'm just saying, from my point of view, it was just God showing me, and I'm like, it was my way of going, stop wasting this. Because once you're married, goodbye to your free time, your money, no, just joking, not at all. But, it's a season you'll never get back. It's a season you'll never get back. So don't waste it. And I was guilty of that at times. And again, like Jemima, I threw myself into the house of God, and I honestly just poured myself. And I said, Father, you have to bring it to me. And literally, God brought my wife to me in Malaysia on the side of a stage. So.
Wow, yeah. Come to think of it, the number of years we actually stay married is way longer on an average than we are single.
Yeah, it's like 40, 50 years. You don't get that long for murder.
Okay. Wow. Okay,
I have a very resilient wife.
Okay, Pastor Mark and Pastor Jem, your story about how the Lord brought you all together is an incredible story. How you had coffee and you felt like you were having coffee with your wife, right? Your future wife. Now, a lot of singles have dreams. They felt like God told me that person is my spouse, right? Or they just see someone and they have butterflies, and they're like, man, that person is my future spouse. Now, what advice would you give these people to ensure there is proper accountability? What did you do for proper accountability?
Well, I felt like the Lord had spoken to me in a whole bunch of different ways, from my Bible reading to prophetic words given to me to confirmations. So the Lord really spoke. But even though He spoke so clearly to me, I still thought if my father is not in favor of this, who was my pastor at the time, I invited him on the journey, and then also. I decided that I would never say to Mark when I met him, hey, God told me that you're the one. He had that kind of experience, and I think if I had said that, he probably would have gone, okay, crazy, and put me in that box. And I said to the Lord, when I came to Malaysia, I said, God, I feel so foolish that I'm flying over to him. Shouldn't the man be, finding the wife, like hunting, and finding the wife. And I felt the Lord say to me, no, Ruth was obedient. She positioned herself with Boaz. She laid at his feet, but she did not say a word. It was Boaz who was the one that said the word, that said the first thing. She didn't come and say, Boaz, you're the one for me. And he said, I don't want you to open your mouth until he opens his mouth first. And so he goes, just position yourself. So I just positioned myself for coffee. And that's when I waited until he said to me those famous lines of, I feel like I'm having coffee with my wife. Wow. And then after that, when we started to talk, then I slowly began to tell him of all the signs and confirmations and things like that. So I definitely waited, or you would have thought, he had to have a God encounter. He would have thought I was crazy.
I think you got to remember, when it comes to feelings and emotions, it is so subjective. And sometimes you don't know whether it's God, whether it's you, or the Malaysian water. You don't know what it is that's
Or
you
hormones,
You don't know
hormones.
what it is that's giving you butterflies or making your tummy feel weird or whatever. So you've got to just make sure in something that subjective, to go down the God told me road is really dangerous. Because if it doesn't work out, what, did God change his mind? Did God decide, So I think just be as normal as you can. It's not wrong to pray and seek the Lord, but I agree with what you said. You sort of answered it in the question, which is talk to someone about it. Be accountable to the right people and go, hey, listen. So there were, believe it or not, despite how dramatic our story sounds, there was a guy, Pastor Paul Geeling, who's a common mutual friend, who we both spoke to because he knew her and he knew me. And so I would just say, don't over-spiritualize the process. And our story is an example of two desperate people in their 30s who need divine help. It's not a model for how you get married, right? So don't use... Our testimony should give you hope that anybody can get married, but it should not be a model as to how to get married. Right? So, I remember when I told my story, and I remember I had a few of my uncles say to their kids, listen, he's a pastor, huh? He can say that thing. You don't try, come home and say, God told me that's my wife. I thought, actually, that's fair enough. I mean, that's right. It's not that I'm some special. It was just that was our journey. But, we were in our 30s, and it was not like, the number of people who we would have felt, you feel it's God.
But your parents were okay with it too, and my parents,
my dad's answer was literally this. I said, Dad, I found this, I think this, my wife, he's like, you can run your own church, you can find your own wife. That's literally what he said to me.
But he told me that when he heard my name, he said he had such peace in his heart, and he knew that I was the one. So,
Yeah, he
the
told
Lord
you that,
already.
but that's what he told me. I'm just telling you. So.
So I think including someone in your journey, and we've had different couples include us in their journey before they've dated. They've come to us and said, hey, we're interested in each other. What do you think? Or do you think it's a good idea? Or different singles have come and said, and they've allowed us to speak into their life. And I think that that's been quite special because we've gone, yeah, go for it. Or really, do you really see yourself married? We question, we question. We never say don't marry, but we do say, really, is this the person you want?
The best thing about a church community is exactly that. You have a community. You don't go and tell everybody. Don't go put it on social media. Don't go but tell somebody. There's a difference between telling everybody and telling somebody. Telling everybody is as foolish as telling nobody. Telling somebody is the answer. The question, who's that somebody? It can't be a busybody. It needs to be somebody. It needs to be some person that actually loves you enough to tell you the truth, be a mirror, and I think that way we'll protect ourselves from foolish decisions that could otherwise hurt us and cost us, because we're all human. We'll all mess up.
That is so much wisdom. So much wisdom. Singleness also covers the single again. Those who have experienced divorce or maybe a widowed. What advice would you give someone who is single again?
I think you speak to this, hon. You've shared a lot about how singleness is actually a gift as well. Anyway, I think,
I think singleness don't view it as a curse, but view it as a gift. And that God, just exactly, the same experience happened to me when I was single. I felt the Lord say, I just want you to myself for this time. And I think that's what God's doing with you. He just wants you for himself. And it's the best time to pour into whatever God has for you. I know widows who have had their best season of ministry in that season because they don't have children or a husband that they have to care for. One of my favorite teachers was a missionary teacher, and her husband had died, and she gave the rest of her life dedicated to training up missionary children. And so that was one of the best seasons of her life. And so don't look at it as a curse. Look at it as, okay, God, for this next season, what do you want me to do? What's my mission field, or where am I supposed to be? And then jump in and do it. Don't waste your time comparing. Don't waste your time seeing what you don't have, or waste your time trying to fill the void with another spouse. If God wants you to get married again, then he'll bring it. But if not, it's the season for you to pour into God. He must have a plan for you, or he would have taken you.
I would just say, make sure whether you're single or single again, don't see this as some sort of secondary thing. Don't see it as a waiting room or some side room until these special. It's not at all. I know some married people who wish they are single, as much as I know there's some single people who wish they're married. it's always greener in some senses on the other side of the fence. And whatever season you're in, find contentment, find God, find His peace, find His presence, and realize you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and on your own with God, everything's still okay. I think that's so important.
I think you starting the church single shows you started something significant single. You came here, it would have been a lot harder if you'd had a wife and children and you had to get us ready. You just, as soon as God spoke, you went home, sold your house, and you left straight away. You didn't have to bring anybody on a process. And God used you to start a significant movement all by being single.
I agree with the fact that, look, I've looked through Scripture. You can't find anywhere where God calls a couple. He calls a man or He calls a woman. He doesn't call a couple. Now, that's not to say He can't use the husband and the wife. I mean, both of us are being used, but He still calls a person. So don't think, oh, until I find my spouse, only then can God call us. He's not calling you when you're a couple. He's calling you as a person. And I think if you remember that, you'll realize you're just as powerful. The people who change their lives, you rarely hear about a couple that changed the world. You hear about a man or a woman. Doesn't matter, young or old, single or married. And I just want to encourage you to just value that single or single again season as if God could use me in the most powerful way in this season. Don't ever restrict it or think, I'm sure there's difficult circumstances some people find themselves in, but I think that's important.
What an incredible perspective on singleness. Thank you.